I guess making money and staying in business is more complicated than we originally thought. Hi, my name is Sydney. Welcome back to my channel. So it seems like people really like talking about companies and businesses that have gone broke because they decided to get political with their message. Notably, a bunch of people on Instagram kept sending me this article about a Melbourne cafe, which is where I live, called Handsome Her that recently closed down. What an original name! In 2017, the Feminist cafe made headlines because it decided to impose an 18% surcharge on male customers to reflect the wage gap. Yes, the wage gap that's been disproven time and time again. That wage gap. Fun fact, I actually contacted this cafe in 2017 for a story that I was writing, not about them, but about how a university in Melbourne was having a bake sale and charging men more for baked goods because the gender pay gap. They were actually pretty rude to me. I wasn't really very appreciative of the way they spoke to me on the phone. Just a heads up in case you guys ever decide to have another cafe again. Get better staff. Anyway, discriminatory bake sales and bad customer service are totally separate issues on their own. So the point here is that people are suggesting that the reason this cafe, Handsome Her, has gone out of business is because it alienated men with this man tax surcharge thing. While O'Brien, who's the owner, didn't detail why the store is closing down, it's safe to assume business was not doing well due to its less than friendly way of treating men. And sure, I mean, yeah, that's entirely possible. Although, I'd argue that it's actually just really hard to run and maintain a business in Australia at the moment. In fact, with just a quick Google search, I found out that there are roughly 2 million Australian small businesses, and the data and analytics provider Ilion revealed that just under 55,000 businesses went bust in Australia last financial year. This is a 12.7% increase in the number of failed businesses compared to the year before. So really, it's just kind of hard to stay in business here. Why, you might ask? Well, there's a multitude of reasons. One of which being that the government really likes to tax us. So as much as I would like to agree with other people who've talked about this and say that this is the direct result of these people getting woke and going broke and that feminist cafes are evil, I can't really stand behind that. To be clear though, I am not saying it's outside the realm of possibility, because feminist cafes are in fact evil. However, remember Gillette? The brand that made an entire ad based around toxic masculinity and how bad it is? Well, as it turns out, for some businesses, making your message political doesn't turn out so well. This will more than likely come as no surprise to anyone, but Gillette's sales are down because none of us saw that coming. Procter & Gamble, the company that owns Gillette, saw sales of grooming products including Gillette slip by 1%, continuing a long string of declines. I found another article too that claims just generally across the board, net sales are down by 8%. But P&G continue to say that this ad hasn't negatively affected them at all. We've received unprecedented levels of both media coverage and consumer engagement in that campaign. It's part of our effort to connect more meaningfully with younger consumer groups. Early results, when you look at the age group specifics, both internally and externally, reflect that we're accomplishing that objective. Yeah, funny that. You know who doesn't buy razors? Feminists. Maybe ever. And again, we don't really know if this decline in sales is the direct result of the Gillette ad, but one would think that if the marketing techniques that these people are actually trying to employ are actually working, then there wouldn't be a decline in sales. Yes, let's alienate most of our consumer base. That sounds like a great marketing idea. I mean, and obviously overall business is not this clear cut, but it does make you wonder. It's like a little bit from column A, a little bit from column B, and that's just the idea that we're gonna run with for the rest of this video. Because I can't explain why businesses go out of business. So I guess my overall question here is, how good or bad is it when a company turns their message and branding political? Apparently not that well if you're a bad vegan cafe in Melbourne that hates men, who are the bulk of people who buy women food on dates and never mind. Some of you might remember a restaurant called the Red Hen in Lexington, Virginia, who made headlines because they decided to throw out press secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders. I too hate customers and making more money. But yeah, apparently after that event happened, tourism in that town suffered, and then continued to suffer for many months afterwards. Lots of people pledged that they would never go back. Good job. Trust the Democrats to just ruin something for everyone else. It's like their calling card. Some of you will also remember that the Huffington Post also laid off a bunch of journalists from their publication. As it turns out, so did a bunch of other left-wing media publications like Vice, BuzzFeed, and Mike. Because really, BuzzFeed, there's only so many quizzes you can make about what kind of desserts people are before people realize that you're not real journalism. Even the Boy Scouts filed for bankruptcy at the end of 2018 after that whole issue arose about them allowing girls into the Boy Scouts even though the Girl Scouts exists. But I don't know, something inclusion? Movies such as Ghostbusters, which decided to have an all-female powerful cast that basically ran on a feminist narrative, really did not do well whatsoever. The Miss America pageant decided to cut out its swimwear section in favor of having the girls' personalities more on display and saw a massive decrease in viewership. I love my pageant queens with a lot of personality. In fact, the viewership decline was so bad that even from its key demographic, it lost 36% of its viewers. And there are lots of examples like this across many industries, from businesses to cafes to television shows to movies and so on. But actually, this get woke, go broke thing isn't always the case. Brands like Ben & Jerry's have actually consistently done pretty well across the board when competing with other ice creams. I mean, they're not the best ice cream out there and they don't perform the best, but they're definitely not going bankrupt. As time has wore on, this brand has been very political and even made ice cream flavors dedicated to being political. A notable flavor that they released recently is called Welcome to the Resistance. Together, pecan resist. Although I don't really think that would work if you said pecan, because then it would be pecan resist. That doesn't make any sense. But honestly, I'm not even really all that mad about that. I think it's actually a pretty clever name. Starbucks is an example of another woke brand that's actually doing pretty okay. After President Trump announced his travel ban in 2017, Starbucks' Howard Schultz released a letter to company partners announcing a renewed commitment to hire 10,000 refugees over 5 years. Despite blowback, Starbucks is another brand comfortable with making a political statement and is often in open conflict with the Trump administration. They reported their strongest holiday earnings ever in the first quarter of 2016, even in the face of a Trump-approved boycott over the company's controversial minimalist red cups. This article actually goes on to say that perhaps the reason why Starbucks is still doing well is because it's a pretty big enterprise and it can actually weather the hate it's been receiving. Nike is yet another brand that made a lot of people really angry when it put Colin Kaepernick, the shamed footballer, in an ad, but then it also says that it saw a 31% increase in sales directly after that ad. Chick-fil-A is another example of a fast food chain that got political and actually is doing pretty well. Chick-fil-A experienced a massive backlash after its chief operating officer made some comments opposing same-sex marriage back in 2012. The immediate result was that people showed up in droves basically to support the restaurant that they thought was supporting traditional marriage. I'm not saying here that Chick-fil-A hasn't had its fair share of significant failures, because, I mean, it has. It's been barred from lots of places. They can't open new restaurants in particular locations, but that's also not to say that they're not one of the most successful restaurant chains in America, because they are. So why do some companies succeed and make more restaurants and others go dreadfully out of business? Maybe because everyone needs sandwiches that aren't filled with hatred and feminism. It's actually very simple and fairly obvious. According to the Harvard Business Review, 38% of Americans believe CEOs have a responsibility to speak out on hot-button issues related to their brand. The same study says 40% of Americans would be more likely to buy from a company they know is aligned with their values, but 45% said that they would be turned off from purchasing from a company with which they disagree. So, people buy from companies that they agree with. That's kind of it. I know Groundbreaking. A brand study from 2018 said that 64% of consumers worldwide will make purchasing decisions based on a brand's social or political position. A May 2017 report from the American Association of Advertising Agencies said that 58% of consumers disliked marketers taking political positions. And the American Marketing Association took a similar stance the following month, saying that diving into politics may strengthen brand loyalty, but it stifles growth beyond core consumers. So I guess the best that I can explain that is like, I will buy makeup that I know is not tested on animals because that is something that I believe in that we shouldn't be putting mascara in little bunnies' eyes because that's horrible. But by the same token, I don't want those makeup brands telling me what to think about other issues, even issues that are completely unrelated to the makeup world. Like, don't tell me that you don't like President Trump because I literally don't care about that if I'm just buying your blush. I'm sure the marketing people who are watching this can probably expand on this a little bit better because otherwise, all this information just contradicts itself. There's also a lot of people who work in marketing who think that this political way of going about doing things is actually really risky. A Forbes article took just over 300 people, as a pretty small sample size, and then asked them what they think about marketing and political messages in the companies that they work for. When these marketing staff were asked if they thought it was a good or bad idea to get political with your brand, the bulk of them said no. It's not a good idea. Marketers in larger companies are willing to get politically active, while smaller companies are not. Corporate giants are kind of in between. I remember a while back when Qantas, which is Australia's main airline, started telling its staff that they couldn't refer to their passengers by gendered pronouns and call people wives and husbands and things. I remember being kind of annoyed by that, and then I didn't want to fly with Qantas anymore, and I wanted to boycott them, but they're basically the only Australian airline that flies to America that's not terrible and doesn't make me feel like I'm gonna die on board. Just kidding, I've never flown to America with Virgin, but I'm sure they're fine. Please don't sue me. I'm still mad about that whole Qantas thing, and I'm boycotting them in spirit. Anyway, I think the general message here is that these companies get woke and go broke, specifically when they over or underestimate their chosen demographic or their main audience. And sometimes getting super political as a brand can be perfectly fine, but like these studies often suggest, they never can move outside their original base. Unless, of course, you're Gillette, in which case you just alienate them. So what do you guys think? Do you think that this whole getting political with your branding is actually a good idea? Or do you think more than anything, it's probably going to result in this whole get woke, go broke thing? As always, if you like the video, hit subscribe and the thumbs up button. If you want to leave a comment, feel free to do so. Just don't be rude about it. And I will see you guys next time.